The river is silent at first light, its surface a mirror of pale gold beneath the rising sun. Then comes the sound, an urgent splash, followed by the shrill cry of a condemned man dragged toward the water's edge. His wrists are bound with coarse rope, his knees scraping the mud as soldiers of the Queen pull him forward without hesitation. On the bank, the crowd gathers in tense silence, their eyes fixed on the fate awaiting him. Some pray, some sneer, and others simply wait. Knowing this spectacle is as much about power as it is about punishment. At the center stands the Queen herself, draped in flowing linen the color of ivory, her arms adorned with heavy bangles that catch the light. She does not shout, nor does she raise a weapon. Her authority is quieter, colder, contained in the simple gesture of her hand signaling toward the current. The Nile, wide and merciless, churns as the condemned man is forced into its embrace. He thrashes, pleads, and gasps as water fills his lungs. The soldiers hold firm until his resistance breaks, and his body is carried downstream, swallowed by the river that has given life to Egypt for millennia, and now, at her command, claims the disloyal as its sacrifice. Few outside these banks ever know the full story. To her people, she is more than a ruler. She is judge, executioner, and guardian of loyalty, and her chosen punishment is as symbolic as it is deadly. Betrayal washed away by the Nile itself. The river made both witness and grave. If you enjoy uncovering history's darker chapters, remember to like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The Nile has always been more than a river. To the kingdoms of Africa, it is lifeblood-sustaining fields, feeding villages, and binding entire civilizations to its steady flow. Yet under the reign of one queen, its role was transformed into something far darker. For her, the Nile was not only a giver of life but a perfect instrument of death. It became the final judge of those who dared conspire against her, a stage for traitors to be erased publicly and symbolically, their bodies carried away as though the river itself agreed with her judgment. The Queen in question rules during an age when women in power are rare, and their authority constantly tested. She inherits not only the crown but also the burden of defending it against generals, rivals, and foreign invaders. Her court whispers with intrigue. Loyalty is as fragile as papyrus reeds bending under the wind. Betrayal, in this world, is not an abstract sin. It is a constant shadow, threatening the stability of the throne with every sunrise. History tells of queens in Africa who were both feared and admired. Some are remembered for wealth, others for diplomacy. But this queen carved her legacy through ruthless control. Her punishments were not random cruelty. They were political theater. By drowning traitors in the Nile, she turned execution into a spectacle of divine justice. The river, sacred to gods and people alike, became her chosen ally. What better way to show that betrayal would not only meet mortal punishment, but also eternal rejection by the very waters that nourish the land? This was no hidden cruelty, carried out behind palace walls. It was a ritual of power performed in the open, where subjects could watch and learn. Fear was the currency of her reign, and the Nile, its collector. The Queen's court is not a place of peace, it is a hall heavy with suspicion, where eyes linger too long and words conceal blades. To survive here is to bend the knee not only in body but in spirit, for the Nile waits patiently for those who falter. From the moment she ascends the throne, the Queen knows her crown rests upon shifting sands. Generals dream of her power, advisors weigh the risk of betrayal, and foreign envoys probe for weakness. She responds not with gentle persuasion but with iron ritual, ensuring that every betrayal becomes a warning etched in memory. One story whispers of a nobleman who plotted in secret with desert mercenaries. His letters, smuggled under baskets of grain, promised gold for an uprising against the throne. But before his plan could ripen, the Queen's spies uncovered the plot. He was dragged before her not to stand trial, but to stand at the riverbank. The punishment was not delivered with rage, but with ceremony. The court gathered, the soldiers lined in formation, and the people pressed close, silent and wide-eyed. When the nobleman's body disappeared beneath the Nile's surface, all understood. Rebellion would not only fail, it would drown. Another tale speaks of soldiers, hardened men once loyal to her father, who dared to murmur doubts about a woman's rule. She invited them to a feast near the river, where music played and wine flowed. But when the final toast ended, they were seized. Rope bound their arms, and their armor was stripped from them. The queen herself walked to the edge of the banquet hall, her steps measured and calm, and pointed toward the Nile. Before the moon had set, the river claimed them. Their comrades, spared but shaken, carried the memory like a brand. But perhaps the most chilling account is that of her own advisor, a man once considered her right hand. He was brilliant, cunning, and trusted with the secrets of the realm. Yet ambition gnawed at him. He conspired with foreign envoys, whispering promises of alliance that would leave the queen's throne weakened. When his treachery surfaced, the queen chose not to hide her fury. The execution was arranged at dawn, and unlike others, this one carried no swift push into the current. Instead, he was forced to watch the sun rise, each moment dragging out the inevitability of his fate. The queen addressed him before the crowd. "The river gave you life. Now let it wash away your lies." Bound and heavy with stones, he was lowered into the Nile slowly, until the water silenced his gasps. These rituals were more than death sentences. They were performances of sovereignty. Each act bound the queen more tightly to the myth of divine authority. To her people, the Nile was sacred, its floods believed to be the tears of the gods. By making the river the instrument of justice, she cast herself as the chosen guardian of cosmic order. And yet, not all bowed in quiet fear. Rumors spread among distant tribes and rival kingdoms. Some whispered that her cruelty revealed weakness, that she leaned too heavily on fear rather than loyalty. Others insisted she was brilliant, transforming execution into spectacle so that she never needed to wield the sword herself. Historians, centuries later, would debate whether her reign was held together by devotion or dread. But in her time, the result was undeniable. The Nile carried away rebellion, one body at a time. It is said that on festival days, when the river swelled with the season's flood, she would stand on its banks in solemn silence. The people saw reverence, but her enemies saw a warning, water rising, eager for more offerings. Her presence at the Nile was a reminder. This was not just a river, it was her throne's shadow, her executioner, her silent enforcer. The queen's reign stretched through storms and droughts, wars and uneasy alliances. Through it all, the Nile remained her constant. Where others might build monuments in stone, she carved her authority in the living current, leaving no tombs or statues of cruelty, only stories that flowed as ceaselessly as the river itself. The queen's strategy worked at least during her lifetime. Her reign, though marked by fear, remained largely unchallenged. Rivals hesitated, generals swore oaths more carefully, and whispers of rebellion rarely rose beyond hushed tones. The Nile, that eternal witness, became a silent deterrent. The knowledge that betrayal meant not only death, but a watery erasure, kept would-be traitors in check. No burial rites, no tombs, no offerings for the afterlife, just the cold current sweeping them into oblivion. But fear is a blade with two edges. While it secured her rule, it also isolated her. Trusted allies grew few, their loyalty poisoned by the ever-present threat of punishment. Even those who served faithfully wondered if one misstep, one wrong word, might bring them to the riverbank. Her power was absolute, but it was a power that left her standing alone. After her death, Successors inherited not her aura of terror, but the memory of it. Some rulers tried to mimic her methods, binding justice to ritual executions in the Nile. Yet without her presence, the cold authority in her eyes, the symbolic weight she commanded, the practice lost its hold. To drown traitors was easy. To transform the river into a stage of divine judgment required a will few could muster. Gradually, the executions became less about ritual and more about convenience. Stripped of the fearsome spectacle that had once defined her reign, still, her legacy endured in whispers. Travelers spoke of the queen who ruled with the Nile. Her name carried in hushed tones along caravan routes and fishing villages. Some remembered her as a tyrant who turned the river into a graveyard. Others praised her brilliance, claiming she wove justice and religion into one unshakable bond. For centuries, the Nile itself seemed to carry her story, flowing past ruined palaces and forgotten tombs, holding within its depths the secrets of her reign. Her enemies faded, their plots long washed away. But the image of a queen standing silent on the riverbank, watching as another traitor vanished beneath the current, remained carved into history's darker memory. The Nile still flows, as it always has, broad, patient, and unyielding. The river remembers nothing. Yet it has borne witness to everything: the rise of kingdoms, the fall of dynasties, and the silent punishment of those who defied their queen. For her, the current was more than water. It was judgment, cleansing, and power, all bound together in one eternal motion. To the living, it offered life. To the traitor, it offered only silence. Centuries later, her story lingers not in monuments or carved reliefs, but in whispers that bend history into legend. Was she a tyrant who drowned loyalty in fear, or a strategist who understood that symbols rule more powerfully than swords? The truth is as murky as the Nile itself, where silt and shadow conceal what lies beneath. Yet one thing remains certain: her reign carved itself into memory not through mercy, but through spectacle, binding her legacy to the river that still runs through the heart of Africa. And so the image endures: a queen, draped in ivory linen, bracelets flashing in the sun, her hand raised in a simple, final gesture. The Nile swells, the crowd holds its breath, and another name disappears into the current. That's the true story most people never hear. What's your take on it? Let us know in the comments.